Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, that dang old internet, man, you just go on there and point and click, get in there, talk about www. Call me, you got that.
For some reason or another, you sounded a little taller on radio.
Well, for my money, he's got all the facial characteristics of a criminal.
Now, here's your host, that gravy sopping, crappie flopping, stump jumping, Bible thumping, gun toting, mater growing son of a gun, the Backwoods Baptist himself, Pastor Harold Smith.
Welcome to the Backwoods Baptist Podcast. The Backwoods Baptist American Tour is happening as we speak, and I'm sitting down in a Sunday school classroom / nursery area / studio area with my good friend Mike Stone at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Blackshear, Georgia. Mike, I'm so thankful that you take time to sit down with me today on a Friday, a typical preacher's day off, and I appreciate you sitting down. I start every one of these with, let's talk about how we met.
Right.
And I'll start with my usual explanation and apology for the way it went down. So, I don't know, this was probably 10 or 11 years ago. I preached for the very first time in LaGrange, Georgia. Yeah. I'd never preached anywhere in Georgia. I only knew one pastor in Georgia. He invited me to LaGrange for Bible conference. I met all these preachers I had never met before, had no ties with, didn't know any of them. Mm-hmm. And this one guy he was wild. I don't even remember his name, but I thought it was Mike. And he was just one of those camp meeting style, hey, man, running all over the pulpit. I mean, just jumped off the stage,
Yeah.
So I went to that meeting. I enjoyed it. I went back and preached the next year. And a lot of those guys I still call friends today. But this guy, I thought it was you. And so about a week later, I got this email that basically said, Pastor Harold, this is Mike Stone. I've found some of your sermons online. I'm enjoying them. It's good to meet a guy with like mind. Sincerely, Mike Stone, Emmanuel Baptist, Blackshear, Georgia. And I was like, Mike, which one of those guys was Mike? And I was like,
it was the crazy one.
It's the crazy one. I was like, oh man, of all the people to want to be your buddy, it's the one that's, the wildest one there. And I just messaged you back something like, well, praise God, keep preaching, or something stupid,
It was brief.
It was real brief, and it shouldn't have been brief, but I thought I knew who you were. And then I was talking to that pastor from that church, and I said, well, that crazy guy Mike started emailing me. And it was just one email, but right. I was playing it like he's found who I am,
Stalking me now.
Stalking me now, listening to my sermons online. And he said, we don't have Mike who? And I'm like, well, he's Mike Stone. He's like, brother, Mike Stone didn't go to our meeting. I said, yeah, it's like some weird town in Georgia, like he's like, Blackshear? And I said, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the guy. And he said, Mike Stone's the president of the Georgia Baptist Convention. He said, he can come to our meeting. And I was like, I've totally misunderstood who you were. And not that the fact that you're president would change anything. You honestly didn't know me, and I thought you were somebody else that I really didn't want to be any closer to than I already was.
Yeah, every conference in Jubilee has one of those guys that you hope they don't find you online.
So I was like so embarrassed, and I thought, well, I'll look like a fool now if I just message him back and go, sorry, I just learned that you were not who I thought you were. And so I was like, I'll never see him again anyways. Well, fast forward 4 or 5 years. Wade Lentz and I are doing a podcast, and he says, man, I found this guy on Twitter named Mike Stone. And I was like, down in Georgia? And he goes, yeah, you ever heard of him? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I want to interview him on our podcast. I'm like, man, if we do that, I'll have to apologize.
So, Wade, you'll have to make the contact.
Yeah. And so Wade reaches out to you, and you're like, yeah, I know Harold Smith. And so anyways, when we got online, we were doing it, I think, over, I don't know, one of them online apps or something. And I started with, Mike, I'm sorry I was short with you. I'm sorry for snubbing you and being brief. And you were being kind and gracious and complimenting me. And you just laughed it off. And since that time, we've known each other a little better.
Right.
And we've been able to be around each other a little more. And the Lord's crossed our paths a few times. And I have really enjoyed getting to know you as a person and not just as somebody that listened to my sermons online.
Well, the blessing has been mine, and I'll fill it in from my end. 2016, 17, somewhere in there, I started preaching through 1 Corinthians, and, commentaries and stuff are all over the map on some of those passages, so I was on sermon audio, and I come across this, guy named Harold Smith from Lee Creek Baptist Church out in Arkansas, and I thought even though he's probably a Razorback, he's pretty good, and I would literally listen. My typical sermon prep, I'll be listening to sermons on or around the text I'm going to be preaching in the next few weeks, so that text can kind of start germinating, start marinating there in your own mind and heart. And I could tell from just when you open and start reading the text. Picture a guy on his phone on a sermon audio app. You don't know the guy. Sometimes you just tap on it and you hear, Dr. Drybritches, just reading the text.
You can just tell it ain't going to work.
I don't want 32 minutes of this. And so as I started listening to you, I found that our doctrine, our homiletic style, a lot of things, the way we would outline a text, and then just the doctrinal approach to a lot of those passages going through Corinthians, that I felt we were very like-minded. What I figured when I just got kind of the very brief, hey, thanks for listening, see you down the road, keep preaching, I thought, I guess Lee Creek is this mega church in Northwest.
He's a super busy pastor with no time for emails.
What I need is a friend who's maybe a backwoods Baptist who likes to hunt and fish and, things like that.
If you had sent that email 2 weeks earlier, before I had ever been to Georgia, I would be like, who in the world is this guy? How did he find me? Because the pastor I was preaching for in LaGrange, he was online looking for a sermon that was dealing with deacons. So he was looking at 1 Timothy 3.
Right.
And he was like, I just want to hear somebody that's sound. And he was like, well, I wonder what J. Harold Smith would have to say about it, because I'm Harold Smith.
Right.
He thinks I'm J. Harold Smith.
Yeah.
So he said, I clicked on your video or your sermon, and I'm like, that ain't J. Harold Smith.
But he liked it.
He said, but like you said, he goes, I like the way he's reading his text and introducing it. He said, my wife come out of the grocery store. He said, we listened to you preach all the way home. We sat down and we sitting in the driveway. You finished up your message, and he was like, I'm going to contact that guy.
Right.
And that's how we met. That's how I ended up in LaGrange.
Yeah. And
I'm going to interview that pastor on Tuesday. As I cut back through Tennessee. He's in Tennessee now, but the only people I knew in Georgia was coming out of that meeting.
Right.
And I was like, man, that's...
social media is that way. I get contacts literally from across the country, occasionally something that's international, just the way podcasts work. And,
right.
We, like so many churches now, put our services on Facebook and things like that, all the different platforms. And so it's easy to get a contact from somebody, around the country. I've heard a lot of my sermons from guys around the country as well. That's something.
Isn't that interesting when you find your points of all got this? The Holy Spirit has divinely inspired someone else to use every one of them.
Yeah, well, the most aggravating one, and I do have somebody in mind when I say this, and I'm not going to call their name, but the thing that's aggravating is he's preaching my sermons far better than I am. And my wife consoles me by saying that all of the time I spend, with exegesis and the homiletics of researching and then writing the sermon, he can put it all into presentation only. He's just, he's working on the dramatic side of preaching it. But I'm like, if you're going to preach my sermon, at least don't preach it better than I did.
Yeah, right. I love it when you go preach somewhere and they go, hey, don't preach your message on this because I've already preached that one for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And I think that's why we connect so well is because our preaching styles are similar. Mm-hmm. When I hear you preach, and I tell people, I've told several people, I'm like, Mike Stone's one of my favorite preachers. Mm-hmm. And they're like, really? Why is that? And I'm like, I think because he sounds a lot like me, even though I may not have ever preached that text.
Yeah.
Your approach to it, your illustrations, your applications, you're very practical.
Well, one thing I think that makes it similar is I pastor. It's a little larger church. It's a larger than average church.
Let's not kid anybody. This is the largest church on the tour.
Well,
What's your
But it's-
typical Sunday morning attendance? I know you don't brag on numbers, but I mean, just give us a ballpark number here.
We're probably 900 to 1,000 on a typical Sunday.
And that's 2 services,
two
correct?
services, yeah. We're in a very rural area, 4,000 people here in Blackshear, and we're not really surrounded by very much, so
No.
we're not metro,
Yeah,
anything.
you're on the suburbs of Waycross,
Right,
Which
right.
is not a giant town.
Yeah, but my typical church members are railroaders, farmers, school teachers,
Yeah.
a few people that we would call, quote, professional people, but not very many. It's a blue collar
church.
It's a blue collar jeans and t-shirt
Yeah.
kind of church. And so I've just preached to regular people. It's not a white collar affluent church.
Why don't you tell us how you came here? I know the story, but I want the people listening to hear
Yeah.
how you came here.
Well, just in the providence of God, I'd actually, when I was in college toward the end of my bachelor's degree, which is my highest earned degree, is a bachelor's degree, I determined that I was going to go into law school. I saw it as a ministry. Your listeners are probably familiar with names like Jay Sekulow. I wanted to be a Christian attorney and hopefully be successful enough, maybe with some even side business, that I could afford to do a lot of pro bono work for Christian organizations,
Sure.
Bible clubs at public schools and, churches and things like that. So I had a call of God on my life that I knew was what now we would call a vocational call. But I thought at that time it was law school. While I was in law school, the Lord, through a series of events, confirmed that it was church vocational work, and at the time was music ministry. So I left law school and went on staff at a church in Macon, Georgia. And while I was there, we began to sense that God was preparing us for a move. I was married, newlywed at that time. My wife's friend from college lived down in this area, about 3 hours away from where we lived at the time.
Right.
And I came down here to visit some family, and my wife said, "How far is that from Blackshear?" Well, it was about 30 minutes, and she said, "While we're down in that part of the state, could we have supper with an old college friend of mine, she and her husband?" That's when I realized when we got here, because I wasn't half paying attention.
Yeah.
I knew this, but it didn't really register with
Right.
me, that he was the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Blackshear, Dr. Don Hadaway, who remains one of my dearest friends today.
Yeah.
This was in summer, early fall of 1996.
Wow.
So we came down here just to grab supper one night with, our wives were friends from college.
Right.
What I didn't know is that she was actually the choir director at this church, found out that they were expecting their first child. They had literally just found out, had not even told the grandparents yet, so they certainly didn't tell us. But she had no intention of being a full-time music director at a church. She wanted to be a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
So we sat there having supper with them. He was interviewing me as a
Could
music
this be
minister
the guy
candidate.
to work
Right.
under me as a music leader.
Yes, and so then things kind of followed the way they normally would. Few weeks of phone calls and getting to know one another. Would you be open to come? Let's have lunch together. Things that have happened, 100,000 times in Baptist life. We came down in view of a call. This was the first move that I'd ever made in ministry, and I was the first staff member that he had ever called. So he was young in the ministry. I was. We were uninformed about maybe some of the wiser practices. He brought me here in view of a call. Now remember, I'm the music minister at that time, so we led the music that morning, or I did, and that night we led a full music service. My wife's a great singer, and so we did some solos and
I've
duets.
heard you sing. Yeah, you're a great singer as well.
Yeah, well, she's a tremendous singer. So we did some solos and duets and congregational singing that night. And they voted unanimously to extend a call. Well, I had not yet decided that I would accept if they extended a call. And the pastor knew that. He knew that I had not made up my mind.
This was something that he and your wife and your wife's friend had all cooked up. You were
Right.
still
I'm still
way
on the
mixed.
outside. So not to make a long story too long, but it was really just such a move of the Lord, because my wife and I went back to Macon. We took 2 weeks to pray about it, and on a Wednesday night, I had promised the pastor an answer by that Wednesday night, which was 2.5 weeks after they voted on us to come. I was convinced the answer was going to be no. My wife, we felt that this was not the Lord's will. But yet we had prayed that whole time, Lord, more than anything else, we want to be where you want us to be.
Yeah.
Don't let us miss this.
Right.
Our heart was clean and pure, but in our mind, we just didn't think it was Blackshear. I called Brother Don to tell him no, and literally the word yes came out of my mouth.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and it was similar to, although I don't like to be compared to Balaam, the prophet for hire, but it was similar where he opened his mouth for a curse and a blessing came out. I opened my mouth to try to find a gracious way to say, no, we're not going to come. And I said, we really believe the Lord is in this, and we would be so grateful.
And that was the first time you had verbalized that.
Yes, and my wife was sitting on the couch, the old kind of couch that you get as a newlywed that's hand-me-down from like three uncles, and velour couch with a country scene on it.
Yeah, right.
And so we're sitting on that couch. It's etched in my mind.
Even the pheasants perked up on the couch.
So her jaw dropped, her eyes widened, and it was so obvious. We had been married less than a year. I didn't have enough husband buck in the bank, in the marriage bank, to pull that off, except it was so obvious, Harold, that God had just done something in our lives. We moved here in October of 96. I served 5.5 years.
So we're talking roughly 30 years ago, round numbers.
This October will be 29.
Yeah.
And I served 5.5 years as the music minister. My pastor left to go to a larger church in Northwest Georgia, and I thought that I was going to go with him. You know how often a pastor and maybe an associate, or in this case a music
like
minister,
Moody and Sankey.
Yeah, your hearts are really wed together. And when our pulpit committee formed, I told them, find a pastor that wants to bring his music guy with him, because when all of this transition settles down, I'm going to
North Georgia.
To North Georgia to be with Brother Don, to serve on his staff. And I told them that, Harold, because I knew they loved me, and I thought if they were interviewing a guy that wanted to bring his music minister with him, they may exclude him from their search to protect me.
Yeah, right.
So I wanted
you didn't want to be a burden.
Correct. I wanted to let them know, hey, tell that guy, bring his music guy with him, because I'm leaving. 4 months later, I was unanimously voted to be the pastor of this church.
Now, were you preaching here during that time?
They had named me as interim pastor, mainly for administrative reasons. We had multiple members of the staff, and somebody's got to ride
somebody's
point.
Got to be in charge here. Yeah.
And so I was the interim pastor, but I was not preaching. They had asked me if I would line up the pulpit supply. We're about an hour and a half away from a Baptist college. They knew that I knew preachers, and hey, until we get, the committee gets together and maybe lines up even an interim pastor to preach, would you line up the next 6 or 8 weeks of pulpit supply? So I was the contact on a Saturday when the pulpit supply had to call and cancel at literally the last minute. 10 o'clock on Saturday night is last minute. And I called. I did not want to call one of the other staff members to preach, to put a sermon together on late notice, and this was the super spiritual reason why, okay? The church was giving me a small stipend for additional interim pastor duties, and I just thought, I don't want to call them on a Saturday night and them be mad and say, he's the one getting paid more money to do this. And so I stayed up most of the night and wrote what was my very first Sunday sermon.
You're kidding me.
I had, I'd taught Sunday school through college and then after college. I had filled in at Wednesday night prayer meeting, but Wednesday night prayer meeting for us and the Bible study with that is like it is in probably 95% of churches. It's a go over the prayer list, have some prayer time, and teach what would amount to a Sunday school lesson. I had never, what you and I would call, preached. But I got up that Sunday morning and preached, and I could take you to the spot in what is now our former sanctuary. I could take you to the literal spot on the platform where I stepped to the side of the pulpit, made a hand gesture, and it was like, boom, God's called me to preach. It was an awkward position then because I was...
Yeah, you're mid-sermon.
And I was a staff member at a church with a vacant pulpit. So in my conversation with my wife, I had to tell her, we can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah.
You know, the staff member that's making a move for the pastorate. To make this long story come to a close, the pulpit committee asked me if I would preach some more, and I did. And through that, it seemed to be God was wedding our hearts together, mine, my wife's, and the congregation. And the Sunday after Father's Day of 2002, they extended a call for me to be the pastor. Yeah. So now 23 years as pastor, 29 almost altogether.
Wow.
And we love it here.
Yeah. I mean, I love pastors that stay. I wanted to be a pastor that stayed. I spent 14 years at the last church that I pastored before the Lord put me in this ministry, but I used to, from the pulpit, thunder. I mean, I would just, any preacher thought about leaving, I'm like, don't you dare leave. You go stay there. You're just, I mean, I was very critical, but there's a different level of ministry in a pastor that's been there 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, because I married people that I had baptized as children.
Yes.
You know, I baptized people that I had held as a baby.
Right.
You know, as that not they weren't babies when I baptized them.
Right. But I know what you mean.
But I had been there long enough to do that. And
I've been here long enough to perform marriage ceremonies for infants that I have pictures with the infant at the hospital.
Yeah, right.
And now I'm performing their wedding ceremony.
Right. And there's something else beyond just in the church. It's in the community. When you're in a community 29 years this October, everybody in this community knows who you are. They've seen you. They've observed you. And a lot of times, pastors, their churches are not effective because their pastors are just not nice people in the community.
Yeah.
They cussed out the umpire at the basketball game, you know, and everybody heard it.
Which, sin issues aside, you can, from a profession perspective, you can do that if you're only planning to be there 2.5, 3 years.
That's
because
right.
by the time that bad reputation catches up with you, you're already gone.
Yeah.
And I find that there are a lot of blessings to tenure. There are some burdens that come with tenure, particularly in preaching.
Yeah.
You know, you feel like you're saying the same things again, especially holidays, special events, and things of that nature. Preaching can become a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah.
I tend to meet that challenge by not stopping to preach a special event sermon, but that's a different subject. But I find that the blessings of long tenure far outweigh the burdens.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, maybe there's one pastor listening that this could be of benefit to. Years ago, a couple of guys who then were with the Georgia Baptist Convention published a book called Why They Stayed. And if you look at the cover of it, it's Why They Strayed, but the R is crossed out, Why They Stayed. And it's a statistical type book, a lot of research-based theories that they put forward of people who grew up in church and they're now middle-aged perhaps, and they're raising children and teenagers in church, and they never strayed. They've stayed in church. They never had that season of prodigal living. And the book was studying the common denominators between those families. The authors are quick to say they're not saying that it's causational, but it certainly is common denominator.
Yeah.
And one of the top common denominators with those families is these people who are now 35, 40, 45 years old felt that they had a relationship with their pastor when they were growing up. They felt that their pastor loved them, he knew them, he was involved in their life, so to speak. And the truth is, God may call a man to have a more itinerant ministry.
Yeah.
God may call someone to be what we now call transitional pastor, and he's here 2 years and moves on to help another church.
Right.
He's there for 2 years and moves on. I do think those kind of ministries should be more of the exception.
Yeah, they're rare.
Than the rule.
Right.
But if you go somewhere every 2 years, 3 years, you're never going to have those kind of relationships with those people.
Yeah.
And that's above my pay grade to say God's not calling you to move on a frequent basis. It is to say that church and those people and that pastor will never have the blessing of some of those things. And I'll add this one other thing. I hadn't been here maybe about 3 years when a little group of about 3 people kind of came after me. Now, as pastors know what I mean by that, right? They came after me. I called a mentor of mine, and I was ready to quit. And he said, "How many are there?" I told him. He said, "How many did you have in Sunday school?" Well, it just so happened that day before we had around 700. I gave him that number. He said, "Let me tell you what to do. Put your resume back in the drawer, get off the phone with me, get down behind your desk, and kiss the ground. 3 out of 700 is as good as it's ever going to get, and you're going to find out those 3 people have first cousins in the next church that are just like them. So stay where you are." And I took that advice, and it's been a blessing to me.
I agree. I mean, as a guy that does intentional interim work, I don't know a lot of other people that do what I do. I mean, I know guys that'll go around and help pastorless churches, but I'm talking about someone that will actually come in and be their pastor, stay with them for 2 years, actually fix issues, address them, find a pastor, and don't leave until that pastor gets it. I know very few guys across the country that do that. But I can name you a couple dozen men that have never stayed anywhere longer than 3 years.
Right.
And they've showed up saying, "My wife and I want to raise our kids here and live here till the Lord comes back."
Right.
3 years later, they're doing exactly what they did in the last church 3 years in. I think that's dishonest. I'm not saying God can't move you, but you ought to have a little talk back if God says move.
Yeah.
You know, God ought to have to tell you, like he told Peter 3 times, "Eat off the sheet." Peter said, "No." And he said, "Hey, don't gainsay," in the King James. "Don't talk back to me."
Right.
That's the way I had to leave Lee Creek. I was like, there ain't no way. I've got it made. These people love me. I love them. I've got a nice salary. I've settled in. I'd be a fool to leave. And then I'm reading that in the Bible that, it's the fools that follow Christ. And so I'm not saying God can't move you, and I'm not saying that men don't grow. But if you've just got a track record of jumping across the country, and behind you are a dozen train wrecks,
right,
something's wrong.
Yeah, and the Lord may move me tomorrow. He has that right, certainly, to do so. But you mentioned something just a moment ago about a pastor who's going to stay a while, coming in and being willing to put down some roots and fix problems. Let me give you a quick illustration. My wife and I, we have we got 4 children. 2 are now adults, 1 is married. And with that married child, we're looking at helping them flip a piece of property that they can live in. And the question is, as we're talking about what kind of flooring to put down, what kind of kitchen cabinets, the quality.
Right.
The question is, how long are you wanting to live here? Do you want to live in this house for 3 years, 4 years, while you save money to buy where you want to have your forever home?
Right.
Or do you think this could be the house you're going to be in for 60 or 70 years? Because that has a bearing on how much money you're willing to put into the flooring for the living room. Okay.
Yep.
And if you understand that analogy, if you know that you're planning to stay here and retire here, then that problem you have with the deacons ministry, you've got to address it.
Yeah.
If you know, however, that, man, if I can just last until Christmas, then my Christmas present to me is going to be an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Then I leave that issue unaddressed, and then the next pastor comes in and does the same thing. The next pastor does the same thing, and before long, the rotten boards of ministry, the rotting fascia board of ministry, the old moldy carpet of ministry, the sagging doors of ministry never get fixed.
Never.
Because if I know that I'm going to have to stay here and live with that, me personally, not to stretch the analogy, but I'm going to put in the time, the effort, the energy to fix the problem.
That is great. That is a great analogy. I usually say it like this. I usually say, treat the church like you own it, not like it's a rental.
Yeah.
And I don't mean ownership and that it's my church.
Right.
But like if I own the home, I'm like, we just need to tear that out and put it back right.
Yes.
If it's a rental, let's hang a sheet over that.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times I think pastors come in and they look around and they're like, yeah, everything needs new paint. And they just go roll and paint. And I'm like, no, really, it needs a whole new wall, or that wall needs to be torn out.
Yeah, there are a lot of pastors, they think that the way to turn a church around is sort of like these extreme makeover television shows, where your wife goes grocery shopping for 2.5, 3 hours and comes back and everything's painted until about a month later when the paint is peeling off the cabinets. You didn't take the time to prime it and sand it and do it the right way. Most churches need far more than just a quick coat of paint to spruce up the exterior. Of course, we're talking about ministry, not the physical building.
Sure.
But if you don't plan to stay there and put down roots, you're not going to do that. The other part of planning for long tenure to fix problems, if I know that I'm going to be here another 20 years, I'm talking about myself personally, then I'm going to take the time to fix that problem correctly. Take paint, for example, if we stay with a home improvement analogy. If this needs 2 coats of primer and then 2 coats of paint to be done right, and it needs to dry 24 hours between each
take a
coat,
while.
I'm not going to be able to do that in one afternoon. Most problems say, for example, a problem with the way that deacon ministry operates. You're not going to fix that in one meeting where you hit the table and say, bless God, we're not going to do that anymore. That may end up being a reason why you only last 2 more months.
It's last Sunday. I mean, it is Friday, August the 1st, 2025. You and I are sitting down talking. I think it was July 27th, if my calendar's right, or 26th. I was sitting in Derek Melton's kitchen or dining room. I was interviewing Pastor Derek Melton, pastor of Grace Life Church in Pryor, Oklahoma. And I said, tell me how long you've been here. He said, this ministry started when I was a police officer in 1991 as a troubled youth ministry. He said, and then, of course, mom started showing up with her troubled teens, and we had a full-blown church by 96. And he was a charismatic pastor. I know I'm retelling last week's podcast, but he was a charismatic pastor. And then he starts reading the Bible. He's like, wait a minute. I don't think you can lose your salvation. So everything he's been preaching for 5 years, he's now, backtracking on. But the perspective you get when you sat down with a man that's preached, like you said, in the same pulpit for 30 years, 25 years, and he's having to live with the sermons he's preached. He's having to live with the kind of people his preaching produces. There's certain people, I'm sure, I never talked to you about it. There's certain people, I'm sure, that within a few years of you being here, they're like, Mike Stone's not for us.
Right.
And there were other people that came in and they said, this is what we've been looking for.
Right.
That church takes on the personality of its pastor.
Yes.
If a church never keeps a pastor long enough to take on a personality, it takes on the personality of its deacons.
Correct. Whoever the patriarch and matriarch are.
It could be a grandmother.
Yep.
It's just whoever is the steady, stable voice. We see this in homes, not the buildings. We've been talking about the building, but we see this in parents. If your house was just a rotating, mommy's boyfriends coming through, you had no stable growing up. And it hinders your ability in society.
Yes.
A lot of our churches have been hindered from no stable pulpit ministry.
Harold, when I read that book, Why They Strayed, and part of what I took from it was that challenge to put down some roots and stay planted as the pastor, I actually used the analogy of a home. If you imagine a woman, say for no fault of her own, other than maybe not using a lot of wisdom, let's say she's on her 7th husband by the time that boy's graduating from high school. We should not be surprised that boy would not have a healthy view of marriage and manhood and stability, loyalty, through no fault of that young man.
Sure.
Because there's been no stability. It's not been modeled for them. And we can criticize church-hopping Baptist members who get upset about one thing and move their letter, as we say. But a lot of pastors do the same thing. While it's on my mind, I'll comment here. Staying now 23 years as the pastor has caused me to have to be a more effective preacher. Now, people listen to my preaching and say, well, I don't think that it's that effective. Then you ought to hear it if I'd only stayed for 3 years. I promise you it's better. because you realize you fall into ruts and patterns
Yes.
that and maybe the same illustrations, the same stories.
Yes.
I preach through books of the Bible as you do, and so that helps me stay off of hobby horse topics. But I've heard plenty of preachers, they say they're preaching through books of the Bible. They read a different text every week, but they end up preaching the same sermon, or at least one of the same 5 every week. So staying somewhere forces you homiletically to sharpen those skills and to try to not be so repetitious.
Yeah, and not to just be going through the same motions.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating to me if I have to listen to a pastor who essentially preaches the same style sermon every time. There's no change in approach.
Right.
It is the same stale 4 points, which are basically the same 4 he had last week. Just he used C words instead of P words, and you know it's dry and stale. So I as a pastor just determined about a decade in, I said, you know what? I'm not going to preach verse by verse through a book in this summer. I'm going to do a series of topical messages. Well, I had 3 topics in mind. So for 3 Sundays, I nailed them. And then I was like, oh no, this is why I preach verse by verse.
Right.
But I really had to get down on my knees and beg God. I'm like, I need topics. So now that I travel around and preach, I'm tempted to go, you know, that was a great sermon I preached last week.
Preach it again.
And everybody needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with preaching a sermon again, but you fall into the laziness trap.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this in pastors where they're constantly re-preaching sermons they preached at their last church. And that works great for the first couple years. And then you're preaching some sermons that probably shouldn't have been re-preached.
Right.
They weren't that great the first time around.
Yeah. And I could tell you, I'm sure that's an incentive to move.
Yeah,
Because
ran out of sermons.
Yeah, now I've got a library from which I can pull of my own sermons, re-preach them, spend more time with Junior, spend more time probably in a bass boat or a turkey blind or a deer stand. But the fact of staying here means that, which is not to say you never re-preach a sermon or never retell a story, but you just have to acknowledge that they've heard that a lot. The other thing that it's done for me, I'm talking about longevity in preaching, long tenure in preaching, it has freed me to where I don't feel the pressure that every sermon has to be a home run.
Yeah.
Every sermon is not going to be a Delmonico steak. There are some sermons that are going to be a ham and cheese sandwich with a bag of chips.
Yeah.
in part because sometimes that's what the text calls for.
Yeah, not every sermon, not every text is just something you can rev up.
Every text is certainly God's word. That's our view of the Scripture. But every text is not necessarily a home run sermon.
Yeah.
Some text, and therefore some sermons, are going to be a lay down a bunt and try to move the runner over.
Yeah. Well, we know
sermon.
Psalm 23, but we don't know, say, Psalm 143.
Right.
You know, some Psalms are just more memorable. They stand out more. They're more applicable. Other Psalms are not. And sermons are the same way. All of those Psalms are the Word of God. Something I want to get you to talk about just because of the uniqueness. This is a large church. And I say large, I mean, if you're having 2 services and you're seating more than 100 people, this is a large church. Talk about how you manage your time. I mean, I have pastored churches that ran, and in an interim basis, that ran 100, 150. And, of course, I'm the new pastor. I'm only there for a year or 2. They're in a time of turmoil. You know, everybody wants my ear, but I can't imagine 700, 800 people that I'm accountable for on any given Sunday, 900, whatever the number is. I know you have staff that you can farm that out, but I also know you like to hunt. And you're not just going out trying to kill one big buck deer a year. You actually like to eat deer meat. I mean, when we first started talking, you were talking about how many deer. You had like some landowner tags, and you were like, brother, I've got 4 kids. I'm trying to feed a family of 6 here. We eat deer meat. And I was like, all right, he's my kind of guy, you know. How do you find time to slip away and go hunt? I mean, give us some insight on that, Mike, because you uniquely are my unique opportunity to ask you about it.
Well, first of all, to answer the question, how do you manage your time? I would say any given week, not as well as what I wished that I had done.
Yeah.
one thing in preaching through books of the Bible, these ministry philosophies, they kind of intersect. They're interwoven. In preaching through books of the Bible and planning to be here for an extended time, I know what topics are coming up, what texts are coming up, so I'm able, I can sit in a deer stand during that time of the year, with an AirPod in, and I'm listening to sermons, or I've got my phone app out and I'm scrolling through.
You're multitasking.
Yeah, multitasking with that. I'm thinking through the text. If I've written my sermon outline early enough in the week, and I can go Friday morning to sit in a deer stand, I'm meditating on that passage. I'm going through it in my mind, and with the notes app on my phone, I'm writing down, illustration, until I can get back to my computer to do that. I rarely hunt by myself. I'm almost always taking one of my kids. And so there's a multitasking aspect of that as well, especially our youngest son, Matthew. When he was 6, he's the baby. When he was 6, I realized how quickly my other kids had already grown up. And I made a statement to myself when he was 6 years old that if he wants to go hunting, if I can go, not if it's convenient, but if I literally physically can, I'm going to take him and work out the other details later.
Right.
That has sometimes had me cleaning a deer until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then going inside and doing some work on the computer till 2 o'clock or so in the morning. Years ago, James Dobson...
time out right here. I got to jump in. We'll jump back to James Dobson.
Yeah.
I know you've texted me late at night. You're an hour ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mike's still up. Do you? How many hours a night do you sleep? Because I've wondered. You've texted me early in the morning. You've texted me like late at night. Not like bothering me. I mean, just sending me something, and I'm like, does that dude ever sleep?
I'm usually in the 5 to 6 hour range. I don't need a lot of sleep. I've learned to work tired. To be honest,
get it done.
Yeah, but back to the original question, kind of multitasking and
James Dobson.
James Dobson made the statement, don't prioritize your schedule, schedule your priorities. And most of us, we prioritize our schedule. We wake up and we think, here's 7 things I need to get done today. Well, you may get all 7 of those done. You may get them done in a prioritized order, but the most important thing you should have been doing might not have even been on that list.
Yeah.
And so I made a practice when my kids were little. We had a special meal every week. We called it Special Day. It was a special day with Dad. My daughter Michaela, for example, every Thursday for lunch. I took her to lunch every Thursday. There would be maybe 2 or 3 times a year I'm coming back from a revival, and I would reschedule it to a different time. But the fact that we had that Thursday lunch date and the other kids had a different meal of the week meant that I knew I had to reschedule it.
Yeah.
And it was a priority for us. On the ministry side, pastoring a larger church, I do have to delegate a lot. And I spend a lot of my time having to follow up and make sure that it's been done. Now, I have a wonderful staff.
Right.
But one of the phrases I use in leadership teaching is that delegation does not relinquish responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it heightens responsibility.
Right.
I can't say, well, I delegated that to my associate, and therefore I don't know anything
bishop
about it.
Bishop means overseer. You still have to ensure it gets done.
So I've got to see over if I'm going to be an overseer.
Right.
And so delegating those things and trying to focus my attention on the things that only the pastor can do.
Mm.
There are certain things, I don't care if you're in a church running 40 or if you're running 4,000.
Yeah.
There are certain things that only the pastor can do.
Yeah.
A bereavement call. If one of my staff members goes to a home where someone has just died, they need to say, Pastor is out of town tonight. He's going to be calling later tonight.
Yeah, right.
He'll be here
tomorrow. There needs to be an explanation of why you weren't there.
Correct. And in any size church, there are those things that only the pastor can do. And I've got to focus my time and attention on that and delegate as much of the rest as possible. On the home front, there are certain things that only I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't hire out my yard work, but if it came down between fathering my kids, right?
Yeah.
Parenting my kids and mowing the grass, I can hire somebody to mow the grass.
Yeah.
I can't hire someone to take my son fishing,
Right.
not as father-son fishing time.
Right.
Only I can take my wife to lunch.
Yeah.
And so from a profession side and that ministry side, I try to focus on doing those things that only I can do. And in any context, that will be more than enough to fill up your schedule.
Yeah, right, right. I always wanted that perspective. My parents attend a larger church, and they have a tremendous pastor. And I'm like, I was talking to him. I went to church with my mother at Mother's Day and my dad at Father's Day. I haven't done that in 20 years.
Yeah.
Because I've been pastoring all the time, and I'm not ever around. I just didn't have anywhere to preach on those 2 Sundays. And I said, if nobody calls me, I'm going to church with my mom and dad. So I called my pastor up where I would normally go, and I said, I'm going to go to church with my mother. And this is a church I grew up in. I hadn't been there in 30 years since I got married. So we went back to church there, both Mother's Day and Father's Day, and First Baptist Greenwood, Arkansas. And their pastor, Ronnie Dill, I went up to him afterwards, and I said, brother, I just want to tell you, I've heard you preach 2 tremendous messages. You didn't preach on mothers, and you didn't preach on fathers. Right. And I commend you. I'm not against Mother's Day, Father's Day messages. Right. But he's been there like 20-plus years. And he just continued through his book that he was preaching through, And I said, you do a tremendous job preaching. You handle all of these people so well. I mean, I hear a lot of young preachers like, well, I just need a bigger church. I'm like, brother, no, you don't. 50 people are sinking you. You're leaving. Right. You're looking to get out of here because 50 or 100 are wearing you out. It takes a different man. It takes a different mindset to do that. And I admire you for that.
Well, part of it is being able emotionally, psychologically to relinquish some of those things.
Yeah.
And to know that I have to be okay with not making every hospital contact.
Yeah.
It's not just that my church member has to be okay with it not being the pastor. I've got to be okay with that.
Right.
And not spend my time wondering, are they mad at me that I'm not the one
that you didn't go see them when they had their surgery?
Yeah. And, for guys with multiple staff, I think it's important that they go and that they are mindful of that they're representing you, they're representing the church, name dropping in that sense. And, of course, sometimes a phone call goes a long way when you're in the midst of doing something else. I'll also say, just as a practical matter, I have to have almost all of my sermon work done before I come to the office.
Yeah.
I do very little sermon prep. And, of course, you can pastor a church of 50 and this be true. I do very little sermon prep at the office because by the time my truck is in my normal parking spot, somebody's always knocking on the door. Do you have a minute?
Yeah.
And, of course, that means 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I've got to have my sermon work done before I come to the office because by then it's over.
Yeah. I learned that if you're in the office, people feel like, oh, he's in the office, he's waiting to talk to me, And when we were meeting here, you said, I'll be parked beside the sanctuary in a certain truck. And I was like, what in the world? And, of course, I pull up and you're on the phone, you're talking. I'm like, okay. And then I realized, the people are driving by looking to see if Brother Mike's in his office and you got to park somewhere else. Or you, like you said, somebody's going to be knocking on the door and wanting to talk.
The truth is, this room that we're in now making this recording was my office when we moved into this building when it was new. And the only place to park faces the main road. And I'm in a small town. Everybody recognizes my vehicle. Yeah. And it is not that I don't want to be available. It's just that if it's Friday afternoon or Saturday morning and I'm in here because of a busy week finishing writing my sermon for Sunday, I don't have time to sit around and chew the fat about SEC football. And so I literally
Do you talk about the rest of the SEC or just the Georgia Bulldogs?
Well, I like to, it depends on if you're talking about them good or talking about them bad. I'd be happy to talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks, but I may have to repent later.
You mentioned that, and when I pastored at Lee Creek, I had a lot of people that were not members of our church that just lived in the community, knew me, respected me to some level, and they would want to stop by occasionally and get my perspective. And I knew if I had work to do, I couldn't park in front of the church.
Right.
And I got to parking around back so much that I kind of had a little trail beat down on the grass where I would back in. And this guy come into my office one day, and I said, "Hey," I said, "what are you doing here?" He said, he was a member of the church because he had a key. He said, "Well, I've learned if I want to catch you, I need to look around back." So I drove around back, saw you parked back there. And I was like, "So you knew I was trying to be here secretively."
And you came anyway.
And you came anyway. And so I thought, this must be important. And it wasn't.
Right.
And
well, Harold, on a couple of occasions, my wife would bring me up here to the office and drop me off.
You off.
I live about 1 mile from the church.
Yeah.
And seriously, especially maybe a crazy week with family or ministry, and it's Saturday morning, and I'm not ready, okay? And she would bring me up here and drop me off so that there was no vehicle here. And I'm in here with the lights off, hiding away.
Yeah. Do you typically have like a day of the week you take off? Do you try to pick a certain day, or do you just try to work in time as you can?
I try to take office hours off on Friday.
And here I am on Friday.
But I'm never off, and I mean that literally, not begrudgingly. I'm never off. I don't want to be off. I want to stay engaged with the lives of our people.
Yeah.
But as far as planning things with my family, I try to take Fridays away from the office. My wife would testify, I spend most Fridays finishing sermons, finishing things for Sunday.
But you're doing it outside of the office
Correct.
setting. You're doing it at home.
It feels totally different when you're
Sure.
sitting in your pajama pants,
Sure.
with laptop in your lap, ball game on.
Right.
Feels totally different, and it is different. But
Right.
typically Friday's not an office day for me, and then Saturday as well.
Yeah. Hey, that's good. Well, we've been going for about 50 minutes, and it's your day off, so don't want to keep you here forever. And we talked for quite a while before we got started, because that's typically what you and I do. But is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Anything else? Any issue? Maybe a Baptist related, preaching related, just anything you would like to rant about? Is there anything you were like, man, I've been struggling with this, or I can't figure, Are you good?
Yeah. I would say one thing that I see, I've seen it in my own life at times, and I think I see it in other preachers' lives. I'll leave that, to the Lord's omniscience, but I think that I see it. And it's the desire to be accepted by other preachers, to run with them, so to speak. Yeah. Some of that is so that you may have invitations to preach,
right.
Places to go, revivals to do. But then just the desire to be accepted. Mm-hmm. The whole peer pressure thing did not stop when we graduated from middle school or high school.
That's
the idea, the guy who says, well, I don't give a rip what anybody thinks about me. First of all, he's not telling the truth. Secondly, if he were telling the truth, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
It's not healthy to say, I don't care what anybody else thinks, unless there's some doctrinal issue that you're saying, I'm going to stand on the word regardless,
Yeah.
But that's usually not what's at stake. And I have spent the last several years growing increasingly comfortable in my own skin, from a personality perspective, a preaching perspective, doctrinal perspective. I don't feel like I've got to be this to
in that
make these
camp,
people
be right.
Yeah. For example, I've got some friends that are King James only. I have some friends that are not King James only. And I don't have to try to appeal to either group.
Right.
I'm going to be me.
Right.
I want to do that politely. I want to do that peacefully. Be kind to everyone, but I don't feel like I've got to spend all of my time trying to appease one group or another. And I see that a lot in ministry.
Sure.
And I see it in my own. I see it in the mirror.
Yeah.
Not as much as what I think in times past has been. But if I were to just have one other thing that's kind of on my heart these days, it's to be comfortable in your own skin. And if that means you don't get an invitation to go there, well, you would have been miserable getting there if you had to be somebody other than who God's made you to be.
That is an excellent point. And just hearing you say that explains some things in my own life that I'd never really considered. Mm-hmm. A lot of times preachers will say to me, Brother Harold, you've got the most eclectic mix of Baptist preacher friends. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can run in this circle up here, and you just as comfortable down here, and King James only, not King James only. I mean, the King James guys are mad. Why are you letting that guy preach? He didn't even bring a King James. I'm like, go start your own meeting. This one's mine.
Yeah.
But what I came to a couple of years ago, I remember, and I know we got to go, but this is a great story. I got to tell it. I was pastoring my first church, and we were kind of at odds with the local Baptist Association over just some liberalism and laziness, if I wanted to alliterate it. But I was looking for a group. I was like, I got to find somewhere where I belong. And I got the Sword of the Lord newspaper every week, whether we needed it or not. You know, I didn't sign up for it. And I said, man, these guys are old-timey. Man, these guys, this is God's men right here. So I loaded up my wife, and we drove to Murfreesboro, Tennessee to go to a meeting out there. And I didn't know what to expect, but I wanted to be in I wanted somebody that said, hey, Harold's one of us.
Right.
And I sat through one of their meetings, and I'm like, nope,
this is not me.
This is not me. Mm-hmm. And I got a invitation to go to an expositors conference in Mobile, Alabama, and hear Stephen Lawson and R.C. Sproul preach. And so I went down there, and there were all these Reformed Baptist guys down there talking about elder rule and the evils of a business meeting. And I got into a public doctrinal dispute with one of the elders of the church, over a business meeting. And I was like, these guys are idiots, And so I'm driving back from Mobile, 12 hours to my home. And I just said, Lord, I don't fit anywhere. I'm a weirdo. There's nobody's going to like me. I'm going to be the kid at school that sits at his own table. Mm-hmm. And I got comfortable doing that. And I found out all of a sudden there were other people sitting at the table. We didn't start our own table.
Right.
I just was able to bounce around. I didn't start my own camp. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the Harold Smithites. What people call, use Backwoods Baptists with an S on the end. Mm-hmm. But if you're comfortable, what you just said, if you're comfortable being Mike Stone, then I can be comfortable sitting down with Harold Smith. I can be comfortable sitting down with some big executive. I can be comfortable sitting down with the fundamentalist, the reformers, mm-hmm. The hardcore Southern Baptists. I can work through all of these groups because I don't have to be like them to be friends with them. That's a good word. I
think in conclusion, it ties in a little bit with the conversation we've had about tenure. Yeah. And being comfortable in your own skin. I don't have to try to change or appease something. And I'm talking about personality change. Sure. I'm not talking about not being teachable and able to be corrected if you're in error on something. But I don't have to change to try to appease someone to fit in with you, because fitting in with you is not my ultimate goal. For me in ministry, outside of being a husband, a dad, my parents are still living, thankfully, and so I'm a son. In addition to all that, my greatest ministry calling is to pastor the Emmanuel Baptist Church of Blackshear. Yeah. And all of that is far more than enough to say grace over, and far more than I'm going to want to have to answer for at the judgment. Right. So the idea that I'm going to put myself in an anxious posture to pursue this, to pursue that, at the point of appeasement, is just
or
something.
Be worried about second and third separation of he's on this platform with this guy and that guy's on this guy. And
right. When I ran for president of the Southern Baptist Convention, there was a guy who told me, and I'll close with this.
No, we can go as long as you want.
Well, a guy said to me backstage at the annual meeting of the SBC, he said, the guys in Nashville, leaders in the convention, don't know how to take you. And I said, well, I'm not trying to be rude, but Nashville doesn't have anything that I want, and Blackshear doesn't have anything that you can take. I don't need a cover letter for my resume, a forward for my book. I don't need a recommendation to a denominational job. I'm satisfied and happy, content, to use a Bible word, being the pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church. If God allowed me to serve in this other capacity, that's fine if that's His will. But I'm not going to change who I am and what I believe in order to pursue that. And a lot of guys in ministry don't know how to take somebody like that, because they are used to the person who's trying their best to fit in. And so I just challenge guys, You be comfortable with who God's called you to
But
be.
that right there is why you resonated with so many people. I mean, when you were running for president in Nashville, I knew tons of people that said, I'm going to my first ever Southern Baptist Convention. I'm like, really? And they go, I'm going to vote for Mike Stone because there's a guy, for the first time in years, there's a guy that represents me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and so I knew all these people that were just telling me, we're going to Nashville, and they went and they voted for you. And when they came away from there, they were like, it was just kind of such a letdown. I can think of the Southern Baptist I knew then. I can think of a dozen churches that have left the convention since then because they simply say it doesn't represent me. It's not. It's something different. And I don't say that to run the convention down.
Sure.
Being who you are and just being real, being normal, that is so contrary to people that are trying to win public opinion. Mm-hmm. And we see that a lot in Donald Trump. For better or worse, he is who he is, and he doesn't try to be who he's not. And it's been interesting to me to see people rise in the media that are just themselves. And I'll give you an example. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcast personality, media personality, and he's a comedian and a UFC fight commentator. And he doesn't hide who he is. He's just who he is. Like him, leave him, love him, it doesn't matter. But people want real. Mm-hmm. And they want real in their pastor. They want real. And just what you're talking about there, that is just, in my mind, that's the intangible.
Yeah.
Just being yourself.
And Harold, I make one other application point of that as pastor. We have that same attitude and approach in our church. I've been here long enough, as you indicated earlier.
Yeah.
The church has taken on that personality. Some of my philosophy is now the philosophy of the church. We have a new members class that we require for membership.
Right.
And part of that new members class is here's what we believe, here's who we are, and we don't put our beliefs on paper and put it in a desk drawer.
Yeah.
These are the things we're going to preach. These are the things we're going to teach. We're not mad at other churches who may view that differently. For example, we are a cessationist church.
Right.
I'm not mad. I've got friends that are not. I'm not mad at them. Hope they're not mad at me. But we're not going to teach on things like speaking in tongues and other charismatic phenomenon in this church. And if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for a Baptist church that speaks favorably of Benny Hinn and, Kenneth Copeland,
this ain't it.
This is not going to be it. And know that now I'm going to use this word, in air quotes. We're happy with who God has called us to be as a church. Yeah. And we're not going to adjust, adapt, accommodate to try to make you happy here. Yeah. If doing that requires us to change who we are. I even say in that new members class that if you're in that class, it's because you've either applied for membership in a service or you're a prospective member. We invite folks that have been coming for a while, thinking about joining. They can attend that class as well. If you've determined, hey, now that I know this, Emmanuel is not the church for me, if you'll hang around afterward and tell me what that thing is, I could probably recommend a church for you.
I have done that for more people than attended the church I pastored. I'm like, you need to go about 3 blocks that way.
Yes.
Or you need to go at the other side of town. There's a church, the pastor said just exactly what you believe.
Yeah, it may be some practical thing.
Sure.
For example, we don't have a monthly business meeting. We have 2 a year.
Yeah.
They last about 3 minutes each.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a church that I'm talking about with a godly man, faithfully preaching God's word, sound doctrine, and they have a business meeting the first Wednesday of every month where they pass out copies of all of the checks and spend 45 minutes discussing that, I can make some recommendations for you.
Yeah.
We're not doing that here, and we're not going to start doing it because you're coming. So the idea of being kind of happy or content in your own skin with who you are is not just a personality thing for the pastor as an individual.
Wow.
But for the church to take that on. There are plenty of churches around, and I don't say that...
The church shouldn't be a chameleon changing colors with who walks in the door.
And I don't say that dismissively.
Yeah.
Not at all. But if someone comes and they say, man, we came 3 weeks in a row where it was all contemporary worship songs. We want a church where there are no old-fashioned hymns. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I can't believe you came 3 weeks in a row and we didn't do, an old standard hymn. Yeah. Or if you came a Sunday that it was all hymns, which could be this Sunday as far as I know.
Yeah, right.
And none of that contemporary worship, songs. Well, we're not changing our music to accommodate you. And just being, again, a God-given contentment in who the Lord has called and created you to be personally and as a congregation. Then you don't have to spend all your time chasing your own tail and try to keep everybody happy.
Man, that's good stuff. I'm telling you, Mike, I could sit here all day long and we could talk and swap stories, but you got a day off to get to, and I've got to go see another pastor.
Well, I'm supposed to be painting my house, so my 12-year-old is grateful that we scheduled this in the heat of the day.
Mike Stone, if people want to reach out to you and email and comment or anything, they could probably find something at Blackshear, Emmanuel Blackshear. What's the web address?
ebchurch.net. If you just Google my name and Emmanuel, we spell it the right way with an E. If you Google Mike Stone, Pastor Emmanuel, you'll find me, and my all the contact information is there. Love to reach out any way we can.
Amen. Thanks for being on. And until next time, I'll see you guys somewhere in the backwoods.